out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, the famous Tom Fennell.
This is Tom Fennell.
I am
and
George
here's
Harvey.
our mystery guest.
We have three people coming for the special show that we're having today, and I'll invite people to go to Channel 8 for that. But this is the regular news show, and so what I do every day is go to the news, find out what's going on, and once a week, Tom and I get together and discuss it all. And so we're starting on Thursday, June 4th with news. And our first item...
Now, let me interject something here.
Oh, okay.
Because it's pertinent.
Okay.
We've been getting a lot of feedback.
Yes.
They like our pictures.
Right.
Okay, so this time I've done something different. Pretty near all of the pictures that are pertinent
big.
to what we're talking about are full screen.
Oh, goody.
Okay, so you'll be able to enjoy the pictures. And coming right up is a lovely picture of a fracking operation.
Which people can already see behind Tom.
They
there.
can see it behind us. But
Yes,
I will,
that's right.
At the appropriate moment, it will fill the screen.
You're already, okay. This is from the Hellenic Shipping News Worldwide, and the item is, there will be no U.S.-style shale gas revolution in Europe. The president of the International Gas Union told the BBC, "You cannot duplicate the U.S. experience in Europe," he said. "Politicians are hesitating to accept shale development. The United States has experienced low gas prices because of fracking."
That picture is them off-gassing and wasting, if you will, some gas that's combined in the oil, or it's in the oil formation, and they're trying to sell oil, this particular company, so they don't want the gas, so they're burning it.
So they're burning the gas, and basically this is what's called flaring.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could trap the gas, but in some cases, the gas has got impurities in it that are expensive to remove. So instead, they just burn it. And
well, when I first traveled to Saudi Arabia, I approached Dahran Airport at night.
Oh, no.
And you could see in the desert all these flares here and there, everywhere. They were flaring everywhere.
Yeah.
2 years later, all the flares were gone. It's not that they used up the oil.
They figured out
they captured the flare. They captured the gas.
So what you were just describing reminds me of driving through Scranton, Pennsylvania at night about 40 years ago.
Probably a very similar phenomenon.
Yeah, and in Scranton there were piles of tailings from the coal mines, and they would catch on fire.
And burned for years.
They burned for years. You couldn't put the fire out because the fire was inside this mountain, and so the whole mountain just glowed all the time. And that went on for years. That's right.
It's an interesting takeaway from the article here.
Yeah.
Now, they're obviously thinking about fracking, and there's a lot of local opposition to fracking all over Europe.
Yes.
And I'll read this sentence from the article. Some European governments, not at least the UK, are keen to develop their own shale resources. Well, it's the governments. There was resistance to shale development in the UK and Poland. There was no way it would take place in France.
Yes.
Okay, they're pretty strong about it.
Yes.
Other countries, including Germany, Romania, and Bulgaria, have placed moratoriums on fracking.
Right.
So they're sitting there, let's study this.
Yep. And there's a town in the UK where the residents were so upset about fracking that they basically shut it down, prevented it from starting. They shut it down before.
We talked about something very much like that.
We did, and they put up a solar array that was big enough to power the town because they wanted to say they were walking the talk, as they say.
And this also came from the article. I don't know who quoted it, what I'm quoting. The future of gas does not depend on shale gas. There is enough conventional gas to meet the demand for more than a century.
My goodness. Okay.
So what's this all about?
What is it all about? Yeah. Okay.
Can you visualize the letter S with a couple of lines through it?
I think
Over in England, it's the letter L, but I mean,
I think I've actually seen it
have you,
someplace.
huh?
Yeah.
Somewhere, huh?
Yeah, somewhere.
Okay.
Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica. Exxon Mobil CEO Rex Tillerson recently let the world know that global warming or not, his company will keep on going, doing business as usual. However, one of the global petroleum industry's single biggest customers is ready for a change of air. The U.S. Army intends to wean itself from petrochemicals.
Well, that's very interesting because all of our armed forces use an awful lot of petroleum.
Right.
And this, well, let's take Afghanistan. They've got these outposts in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
They've got to truck the oil in there.
That's right.
And the Taliban or whoever the bad guys are has figured out, well, we could pop these caravans of oil very easily.
Yeah.
And they're losing. They're all private contractors. They're not our own trucks. They're Afghanis, but they're blowing the hell out of them.
And they're killing American. They were killing American soldiers in the process. Actually, this kind of, if you go back to the Second World War and you look at the tactics used in the Second World War, the Germans had blitzkrieg, and the Russians figured out how to stop it. And the way you stop blitzkrieg, there were a couple of different things that they did, but they told their troops, don't worry if tanks get behind you because they will die. What you have to do is...
They can't get the fuel.
They can't get the fuel. And they didn't shoot at the tanks. They had anti-tank rifles, but they weren't effective against the new tanks, but they were certainly effective against tankers, which had to carry the fuel to the tanks. And so you attack the fuel, you attack the army. And guess what? You can't attack the sun.
You got a good point. People will try.
I suppose they will, especially the people in North Korea, I think, but it doesn't work.
Well, what was happening in Afghanistan was the price to pay these guys to take the risk to deliver the fuel was skyrocketing.
Yes.
Okay, so getting the fuel to the outposts, it was costing them something like $50 a gallon.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay.
Why are we there in the first place? But that's a whole other story.
We can go through that one. Friday, June 5th, from Vermont Public Radio, we got this information. A study by the U.S. Department of Energy found that a proposed $1.2 billion power transmission line under Lake Champlain would have very little effect on the surrounding environment. The proposed New England Clean Power Link is a project designed by TDI New England to bring Canadian electricity to the New England market.
Well, there's plenty of Canadian electricity.
Yes.
And the New England market can use it.
Yes.
And if they run it under the lake, nobody sees it.
Yep.
It's not a transmission line.
That's right.
It is a transmission line, but it's
not
under the lake.
It's not running through our woods.
And they're going to be burying it under the lake, so it's protected. Don't have to worry about small boat anchors causing a disaster.
Yep, and you don't have to worry about the Lake Champlain monster biting it either if it's buried.
Well, I don't know about that. It's on.
You know, we don't know much about the Lake Champlain monster. Maybe it does root
This
around
picture, I
down
believe, is Lake Champlain.
That is Lake Champlain.
I don't recognize the lighthouse, but
that is a picture that was taken from Lake Shore in Burlington. And I don't know the area well enough. The reason why it's red is because it was sunset.
Or sunrise.
No, this was sunset. Yeah.
Well, I can discern on my screen here the Adirondack Mountains in the back.
Yes.
That's a familiar scene. So.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Oh, back to you.
Back to me. Well, from The Guardian, we got this one. The value of Europe's 5 biggest energy utilities dropped 100 billion euros. $113 billion between 2008 and 2013, in part because of a dogged preference for coal over clean power investments, a new report says. E.ON, RWE, GDF, Suez, which is now Engie, EDF, and NL lost collectively 37% of their share of their market share value during the period, and that decline has continued since, and E.ON, by the way, is dividing to get rid of its coal and other fossil fuel.
They're divesting of their coal.
They're divesting their coal, yes.
So Germany was going to wind up exporting their coal.
Yeah.
So Germany will stay clean. Some of the other countries
Well,
are going to stay dirty.
I wonder how much longer that coal is going to be exported. We've been seeing reports come up saying that there was a report that came out today from Stanford, which said that the fossil fuels would be basically eliminated from the marketplace by 2050.
Well, people all around the world are starting to realize that coal is affecting their health.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they've always taken it for granted. Oh, this is the way life is. And then they're saying, well, wait a second,
Yep.
I was in the town of Agra in India,
Yes.
which is where the Taj Mahal is.
Yes.
And in the evening, it was almost like this pall came over the town as everybody lit up their little coal-fired stoves.
Yep.
And you can smell it. I mean, it was evident.
And that New Delhi, I have read, has the worst air pollution of any city in the world.
I have read that too, yes.
And, the World Health Organization says that about 7 million people are killed each year worldwide by air pollution. And most of that is air pollution caused by fuel. And
yeah.
a huge amount of that is fossil fuels, although open fires in houses, which happens in the developing world.
Happens in a lot of places in the
lot of
world.
places,
They're just cooking over an open fire and
In the kitchen.
on an
They
earth floor in their
yeah. Or on a hearth.
lean-to or
Yeah.
a hearth. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, the next thing coming up is part of the solution.
part of the solution.
Yeah.
And this one is from Your Renewable News. And Advanced Microgrid Solutions has selected Tesla as the primary technology provider for its utility scale energy storage projects. AMS will install up to 500 megawatt hours of Tesla batteries in its energy storage projects. AMS also signed an agreement with Black & Veatch for engineering and construction services. And 500 megawatt hours is about
That's a lot.
that's a lot. I mean, this stuff is $125 per kilowatt hour.
For storage capacity.
I'm sorry, $125. Yeah, per kilowatt hour for
Yeah.
storage capacity. So this is a huge amount of money. This is many millions of dollars.
Yeah, let me bring the picture up again.
Okay.
That's two of Tesla's industrial scale batteries.
Yeah, everything that comes from those people is blue. Have you noticed?
Well, this is a presentation that's a stage.
Yes.
Okay, they had a bunch of shareholders in the audience, and
Yeah.
so they're probably dummies for a picture, but they may be real. But they're showing what they can do,
Yep.
and what they're offering is something that's very much going to help store electricity, no matter what its source
Well,
is.
these Tesla sold $800 million worth of these batteries, and most of them were those batteries in the first week after that announcement was made. And $800 million of sales in 1 week when you don't even have the factory built is pretty impressive.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a vote of confidence there, I would say.
Well, this is pent up demand, and one of the things that has happened is that Elon Musk has gone off and he is now courting the utilities to try to get them to buy Tesla batteries so they can get good, solid, dependable power out of wind and solar and so forth, and it makes organizing the whole thing very much easier.
And not having to pay exorbitant prices for peak power.
That's right. And
This is an interesting sentence from this article. This combination of energy storage technology and intelligent software will allow customer loads to be used as a virtual power plant by utilities.
Right.
We've talked about this.
Yes.
So by putting together their resources and controlling them by computers, they don't have to build a new power plant.
That's right. And on top of that, by having distributed power that is distributed through the countryside, they don't have to build new transmission lines. And on top of that,
Which is another saving, a big saving.
yeah, well, this whole thing of distributed power is
Things are
big
working.
savings.
Things are working out in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's going to take a long time,
Right.
but it is, I think, inexorable.
I think it's
that way.
inexorable. Although I've said this before, It's worth noting, if you go to Wikipedia and you look at their article called List of Largest Companies by Revenue, you'll find that the last time I looked, and that was about a week ago, that list had 64 companies on it, and the breakoff point for the companies was a revenue of $100 billion a year. So there's 64 companies, each of which has a revenue of $100 billion a year or more. Some of them, the revenues are over $400 billion a year. And that list divides those companies by market sector, and 21 of the 64 are oil and gas. And that doesn't count the others that are conglomerates that happen to be selling
that are invested in oil and gas.
In coal.
Just in coal.
Just a lot of investment in coal. The coal industry's investments in the marketplace tend to be more distributed among conglomerates. But the point is, about a third of the biggest companies in the world are deeply into fossil fuels, and they are, many of them, resisting any change to renewable power. Now, only 20% of the utilities in the United States generate their own power. So the ones that don't, like Green Mountain Power and other ones of that type, but they're all over the country, and they range from small municipals to statewide. Yeah.
I think Montana's a statewide utility.
Yeah, but they generate their own power. Okay. The ones that don't generate their power, 80% of them don't generate their own power. And they're the smaller ones in general.
Yeah.
But those utilities can generate their own power easily by installing solar or possibly wind power. And that means that, this is just another huge pressure that's being put against both the utilities that are dependent on fossil fuels and the fossil fuel companies, as solar and wind are growing at rates of 30 and 50%, 30% per year. Those companies are losing their customers.
They're losing their investors.
If you think about it, they're losing their investors, yeah. If you think about it, a company like Google, a company like Apple, a company like, Jake's Hardware Store downtown, wherever you happen to be, can save itself a lot of money by putting in solar, even if the solar power is more expensive to generate than generating power from natural gas. Because if they own their own power, they are paying the producer's costs.
Okay.
And they don't have to take the markup to wholesale to retail from that. Right. So they can get their power cheaper. And that's,
even though it doesn't sound like it's cheaper, it is.
Yeah. That's right. Much cheaper. And so, the question, when are we going to hit grid parity with solar? Well, people are saying it'll happen between now and 2020, but that's grid parity, meaning that the customer who's buying at retail will pay as much for power from natural gas as he does for the same amount for solar as for natural gas, but he doesn't have to pay the power company,
right?
Because the distributed power is something he can own.
He owns it, yeah.
So
and it doesn't even have to be on his property.
No, and these
which is an interesting
big companies are in big trouble, and Koch Industries is in big trouble, in my opinion.
Well, I think Bloomberg agrees with you.
Yeah, I think so, and the various political organizations that they're paying to proclaim coal and oil and so forth as the power of the future are saying that they're conservative, patriotic Americans, and in fact, I think they're selling America down the pike. It's very sad. China is putting in twice as much money every year for renewable power as the United States is, and that means they're going to reach energy independence and very low-priced power much faster. So
speaking of energy independence, we got an interesting one coming up here.
Yeah? What's that?
It's Hawaii.
Hawaii. Oh, yes. Let's talk about Hawaii. My parents lived in
There was a
Hawaii.
guy, I think it was Arthur Godfrey talked about this.
Yes.
He says, I asked this person, I was in Hawaii, and so I asked, how do you spell it? He says, Hawaii, how do you pronounce it? Is it Hawaii or Hawaii? And the guy said, Hawaii.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, that's good, thank you. And the other guy said, you're welcome.
You know, I could go off on the Polynesian languages.
This is
Hawaii.
an interesting turbine. It's in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hawaii has deep water. They're not on a continental shelf like Denmark is.
Yep.
And all of what you've been seeing in England and Denmark, these turbines are anchored to the ocean floor.
Yeah.
But they can't do that in Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Well,
So they built this platform for them. It's afloat.
yep.
Okay, so
How
this
about
is floating.
How about if I read the article thing?
That would be a good idea.
Okay.
I'm just so enthused about this float. I want to talk about it.
It's cool. Utility Dive gave us this, a proposal to install over floating wind turbines offshore Oahu, Hawaii. Hawaii's most populous island could generate 30% of the island's energy needs, according to a report from Fusion. The state produces the bulk of its power from imported oil. The state legislature passed a 100% by 2045 renewables mandate. So these offshore wind turbines can provide a huge amount of power. And that's just one proposal for offshore wind in Hawaii. Why don't we go back to that picture?
I shall.
That thing is an offshore wind turbine that floats, as Tom was just saying. And
Well,
the waves
I'll
go up and
point
down.
to
and I guess it
three,
goes up and
three spots right there, and in that corner
Yeah.
where it's anchored to the ocean floor by cables.
Okay.
So it's not going to go floating away.
Well, no, it's anchored, but it can go up and down.
It's gonna bounce around a little bit with the waves,
yeah.
but
And it won't tilt much because those flotation units go rather deep.
they're pretty big.
Yeah, they're big.
They're big. They're bigger than a swimming pool. That's for sure.
Yeah, my guess is you can see the cursor for the pointer on the screen there near the base of the tower. There, it's moving around. And
this is a very large turbine.
Yeah, my guess is that cursor where it was on the screen would be more than adequate to cover and conceal a human being standing.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So this is a very big device, and of course it can be lower to the surface of the Earth than something that is in a onshore for a bunch of different reasons. Not the least of which is that the wind tends to be higher, closer to the ground, closer to the water in this case. When
I
you're
didn't
in
even
an
think
ocean
about that one,
situation. Yeah.
So this may not be as tall as some of the ones we're
It might
seeing.
not be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. One of the things that I'm seeing there is that it looks like the blades reach very far down, almost to the water, and that
That's a good point. It looks very much like that's what's happening.
Yeah,
Yep.
you wouldn't do that on shore.
Yep.
They are more expensive than onshore, though, because they have to have provision for.
But bringing in oil by tanker is expensive
It
too.
sure is. Well, the energy electric prices in Hawaii
They're high.
Hawaii, we're talking about electric prices that are in excess of 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So this is, the people there are going to get a big break from this. So should we move past
We'll
this?
move
and
back home.
Get back home.
We're
Okay.
gonna move right back home.
Here we are, Saturday, June 6th. One corner of the Whitcomb Farm in Essex Junction, Vermont now has 12,000 solar panels generating electricity on it. The system was built by New Jersey developer PSEG or PSEG.
Public Service Electric and Gas. It's
Right.
a big Newark utility.
Yep.
And it's big.
It is big. Its 3.6 megawatt capacity makes it the largest solar system in the state. It will supply annual needs of about 600 households. This is from WPTZ, the Champlain Valley.
Uh-huh.
There you go. And the one that we're talking about developing in Brattleboro might be bigger than that. Might not, but it might be bigger than that. In fact, it might be much bigger than that.
The one in the landfill?
Yeah,
That's supposed to be, well, it's got a limit of 5.
it's got a limit of 5.
We don't know that they're going to make it to the limit.
We don't know, but I think there's a pretty good chance, a much better than even chance, that if that thing is built, it will be bigger than this thing, which is.
I agree with you.
If you look through the list of solar farms in Vermont, I think there were about 10 or 12 of them that were tied at 2.2 megawatts as the biggest solar farm in Vermont, and that had to do with the benefits that you got out of being in the SPEED program, which has now been updated to the reset.
Speaking of solar farms in Vermont, and I don't have all the information in my head, unfortunately, but
Okay.
coming up very shortly, there will be a tour of solar farms in Vermont.
Oh, cool.
And look it up on the net to try to find the information, because you're going to be, the solar farms are going to be open. There's going to be people there to explain what's going on.
Okay.
And it's all around the state.
Yes. Okay, and
And
where
I
would
don't
a
think it's
person
going to
go?
cost anything.
Where would a person go to see that?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know. So
Google it,
Google
everybody.
solar farms in Vermont.
Google solar tour in Vermont.
Solar tour, yeah.
That would work.
I wish I had the foresight to remember that link, but
Well, yeah,
maybe I'll have it next week. We can talk about it.
good idea. Okay, Argus Media tells us over 30 states are at least halfway toward meeting early CO2 emissions targets called by the U.S. EPA's proposed regulations for existing power plants, according to a study released by the Union of Concerned Scientists. Of these states, 14 can meet the 2020 interim target based on prior actions, which means that they've already organized themselves. They had already organized themselves to meet that.
Oh.
And I think Vermont is going to have a very easy time with this.
They're not on the list that I have here, but there's 14 states
Yeah.
which are already there.
They already have
California,
goals.
New Jersey, New Mexico, Hawaii, Ohio, and Kentucky.
Vermont is not for a reason,
Well,
because we were not affected by that EPA thing at all.
we don't have any
don't have any
generation,
generating-
any fossil fuel generation.
We have more and more generators in the state of Vermont, and they are getting more and more important.
Another 9 states it mentions here are 3/4 of the way to meeting the benchmark.
Right.
So we're making progress there.
We are. They are.
They
We're
are.
in Vermont. We don't need to make progress. But we are making progress. The SPEED program had got to the point that it was producing about 900 megawatt hours per year of electricity, and that is about half of what Vermont used to buy from Vermont Yankee.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. That's a lot of power that we're getting. And that's just individual things, a little bit here and a little bit there. It's not people putting solar power on their roof.
That's not even counted.
That's not counted. That's not part of the SPEED program,
Yeah.
what is now the reset program. All of that is part of the net metering program. And the net metering program is perhaps, I'm going to say 5% to 10% of what the SPEED program was. But the SPEED program includes a lot of commercial things. Wind farms, not many wind farms, but a lot of the biodigesters in Vermont are most of them, or possibly all of them, are in that
They're making
SPEED program.
making power.
They sure are.
Yeah.
Vermont has, as I recall, more biodigesters than any other state.
I think you're right. That's what cow power is all about.
That is indeed. Yeah. Okay.
This is an interesting picture. I'll pull it up.
Isn't that something? It looks like something out of Lord of the Rings. Hydro Tasmania is bracing for the effects of a looming El Nino. Drier than normal conditions have been blamed for lower hydro generation in other Australian states, while the Weather Bureau warns a strengthening El Nino in the Pacific could bring lower below average rainfall in southeastern Australia. And this is it from Perth Now. Tasmania, of course, is
southeast.
south of
southeast.
the main island, and has a climate that's not all that different from New England. But they're kind of braced for a drought, really.
Well, that's what this article's all about.
Yeah.
I think there's a safety valve here. Even though they will get less rainfall in all of Tasmania.
Yes.
The places where they have hydro won't.
Ah, okay.
Or
Well,
at least they're hoping it won't.
They're hoping they won't. And by the way, speaking of drought, Brattleboro right now, southern Vermont, is in what is called a moderate drought. Despite the rain that we've had in the last week, the drought monitor from the University of Nebraska, I went to it this morning, and it said that we are still in a drought, and that could, we're not out of the woods yet. Things were dry. We barely got into the drought about 3 weeks ago, but we'll see what happens there.
I got a little first-hand experience observing this.
Yes.
I drive down to Northfield every Wednesday to deliver some commons.
Yes.
And as I'm heading down there, there's a lot of nice farms on that road.
Right.
And 2 weeks ago, the farms were all bare. They had just been plowed.
Yes.
Last week, there was just a little bit of stubble growing in the fields.
Yep.
Yesterday, they're all green.
Yes.
So that little bit of rain we had has made a big difference on those farmers' fields. These are cornfields.
Yeah.
And they're not knee-high yet, but they're bigger than cabbages.
They grow fast.
They really do.
In Illinois, they say that when you have hot weather, you can hear the corn grow at night.
I had a car, you could hear it rusting.
I believe that. Hearing the corn grow, I'm not so sure of. Okay. Front Page Africa tells us Africa can boost its capacity to generate power, economic growth, and jobs, all three, without precipitating catastrophic climate change. And the person who's arguing this is none other than Kofi Annan. The Africa Progress Panel, which he heads, categorically rejects the idea that Africa has to choose between growth and low-carbon development. So there, everybody.
He's adding to this, African nations do not have to lock into developing high-carbon old technologies.
Yeah.
We can expand our power generation and achieve universal access to energy by leapfrogging into new technologies.
Yes,
that
I
are
absolutely
transforming
agree with Kofi
energy
Annan.
systems across the world.
Yep, absolutely.
He knows what he's talking about.
I am quite sure he does. And, this business of transmission lines, I think, has a great deal to do with that. You don't have to build.
That's what that picture is up there.
You don't have to build transmission lines to little remote villages if you're going to give the
If you've
people in
got
their
a
little
little-
remote villages solar and batteries.
That's happening big time in India, as we have mentioned several times.
That's right. So the next item here is actually
This is
related.
also in Africa.
Times of Oman says right at this very moment, 621 million Africans, 2/3 of the continent's population, live without electricity. A kettle boiled twice a day in the United Kingdom uses 5 times as much electricity as someone in Mali uses in a year.
There's a picture of a map of Africa up there.
Yeah.
And the dark red countries are countries where there's less than 50% of the population has access to power.
Yep. There you
So
go.
what you're seeing is the Arab North and then the Union of South Africa on the south.
Right. And
And a couple
few
of
other
countries, Nigeria, where they got oil. It's on the left there,
Yeah.
right in the middle of the bend in Africa there.
Right.
I don't know what those two other little ones are. Benin, I think, is one of them.
Well, it's hard for me to see. But, this is it's a different way of life.
Well, at least they're aware of it and they're talking about it.
Yes.
And as Kofi Annan said, we can leapfrog. We don't have to
Well,
go into the old ways of doing things.
As I said, I absolutely agree with him. Okay, we're up to Monday, June 8th. C News Renewables. This is an interesting news organization. I look at the names of the people who write for it, and they all look like they're Russian.
Oh, yeah?
Except they don't look like they're Russian. I don't think they are. I think they're Ukrainian or something like that. I haven't quite figured that out. But they said this: increased capacity and strong winds saw Scottish wind power generation rise 83% year on year last month, setting a record for May. The turbines generated enough for 101% of Scottish households. The World Wildlife Fund Scotland said on Monday, that was probably the preceding Monday, which would have been June 1st, as it called on the UK government to rethink its plans to curb onshore wind. And
That in itself is an interesting thing because the people seem to want it.
a lot of the people do, and not all of them certainly.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of opposition in various places, but you know there have been a bunch of polls. For example, there's a lot of wind power in Cornwall, and in Devon. I feel very close to Devon because I used to live there, and it's a lovely place. You know, it's little fields and apple orchards and so forth, and hedgerows. My goodness, you can't get into most of those fields possibly you can't get into, except on a stile,
Yeah,
which means
the hedgerows are.
you cannot get equipment into them.
No, yeah.
But
Ireland's like that too.
Huh?
Ireland
is like that, yeah. And I think about the wind turbines there, and there have been people who are saying, well, it's going to kill your tourist industry. And in fact, what they have found was that for every tourist who feels turned off by it, there's about 4 who feel exactly the opposite. It's an attraction that gets them to want to go there. And these are people from outside who go there and seem to like it. And, you know, I can understand that. That's, you know, there it is.
Well, we've talked about Scotland a lot, and
Yep.
they're on top of this. They're definitely on top of this.
Yeah. Scotland, of course, is at the other end of the UK from Devon, because Devon and Cornwall are in the south. Devon is in the southwest corner of England, and Cornwall is southwest from that. If you ask the Cornish, they'll tell you they're not part of England. So our next one is from Economic Times. South Korea has axed plans to build 4 coal-fired power plants and will boost its nuclear reactor fleet by 2 more units as it looks to increase the share of nuclear and gas power generation and cut reliance on coal. New plans would make the number of planned nuclear reactors 36 by 2029.
That's interesting. I wonder if they will really go through with that.
Well, I think they'll go through with a plan. I don't think they're going to go through with building those reactors.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, they're just so expensive, and the cost of nuclear is continuing to go up. The cost of solar and wind is continuing to go down. We've got opportunities to take care of waste and use it for generating compost and electricity and heat. And so, nuclear power. I really think that Arnie Gunderson was right when he said that the Tesla battery announcement was the final nail in the coffin of the nuclear industry.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It'd be nice if we could get him on the show.
He's
kind of local.
well, he's at the other end of the state,
Yeah.
but he
Well, I know he comes down here periodically.
Yeah.
He appears at some of these hearings. So.
I actually was called by, I was emailed by one of his interns who told me that he had told the intern to go to my blog every day.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
He told you. Well, that's good. That's
the
good.
The intern told me, yeah. So it's nice to feel like you're recognized by somebody. Okay, the blog, by the way, is where we get this news from. It's geoharvey.wordpress.com. We are at the item that we got about SunEdison in MarketWatch. SunEdison Inc. plans to invest $15 billion in India by 2022, according to a top executive, as the renewable energy company seeks to deepen its foothold in a country where power producers have struggled to meet demand. The company plans to install a total of 15 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity in India. It's interesting. For $15 billion, they're going to install 15 billion watts. That's $1 a watt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa!
Well, India's really getting on the ball here.
India's
Now,
getting
this article mentions that about a third of India's 1.2 billion people, wow, don't have access to electricity.
Right.
That's changing rapidly.
And the government of India has sworn it's going to get those people electricity fast.
Yep.
So there's a lot of action going on in India, and a lot of it, unfortunately, a lot of it is based on coal, but a lot of it is based on renewables. And I fail to see how they can exploit coal more fully than they already have. So we'll see how that develops.
I'm sure if we knew what was going on, it's all about politics.
There's a lot of politics in India. India has a lot of people, and wherever you have a lot of people, you have a lot of politics. Okay, Press Herald tells us that three large shipping containers. This is not a lot, you know.
There they
In
are.
an industrial park in Boothbay, Maine, have batteries storing enough electricity to run 100 homes for a day. New England's first utility-scale electricity storage system. They are part of a pilot program aimed at meeting park peak demand at a fraction of the cost of new transmission lines. We're back to the cost of transmission lines here.
Well, we don't normally think about it, but they're an expense.
They
Just
are-
keeping them up is an expense.
Yeah, they're
And
a
you know,
big
there's people
expense.
shoot at the insulators and stupid stuff like that.
And Mother Nature is not exactly kind to the lines sometimes.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and which is one of the advantages of burying them at the bottom of Lake Champlain. But you know, maintaining the lines is expensive. Installing the lines is expensive. About 3 years ago, and I've mentioned this before, what is the New England transmission company? New England, not New England, Long
yes.
Island.
Oh, Luca.
Yeah.
Long Island Lighting.
They had been planning to put in $495 million on a transmission line on Long Island, and they dropped the plan because they realized that you can generate the power locally and use it locally for peak demand by using solar power.
Well, Eastern Long Island is quite upscale.
Yes,
The people who live there have money, and we're talking big money.
yes, in some cases.
And a lot of these people, because they had plenty of money to spend, have been putting in solar on their own.
Yes,
So all of a sudden, Loco's plan or their survey, where they said they're going to need all this power, is turning out they don't need all this power because people are generating their own.
that's right. And that in turn means they don't have to spend $495 million. So, you know, again, they're like Green Mountain Power. Mary Powell has said we have to, that her job was to find a new business paradigm, a new business model.
New business model, right?
And that's what they have to do too. They have to find a new business model.
Well, we just showed a picture of the containers.
Yes?
Okay, I also have a picture coming up of the inside of one of the containers.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to
Good.
pull that one up.
Let's look at that.
Be interesting. This is nothing but a battery bank. Nothing but thousands, maybe thousands, certainly hundreds of batteries.
And I would have thought that's the inside of a Home Depot store.
Doesn't look too different.
No, it doesn't. Well, they have a nice, neat aisle there in the middle of everything. That is a lot of batteries.
It certainly is.
Okay. Clean Technica tells us the top 7 industrialized countries, this is on Tuesday, by the way.
But it was 600 batteries in that.
600 batteries,
Yep.
okay. The top 7 industrialized countries, the so-called G7, whose carbon dioxide emissions are a quarter of the world's output, decided to meet at a meeting in Germany to phase out their use of fossil fuels by the end of the century. It's a breakthrough moving on climate change and a strong signal to the rest of the countries of the world, according to the article. And according to me, it's bunk. It isn't, you know, first of all, if that's what we were doing, it's too little too late. But the second thing is, if they're gonna say they're gonna do that, it's like they're saying that they're gonna do by the end of this century, by the year 2100, they're going to do something which I think is going to be done by the market by 2050.
I think you're right. I mean, by the end of the century, they're going to see the word fossil fuels and people are going to say, what's that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Now, we're back to Hawaii.
Hawaii again.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
AEHIKLMNO, AEHIKLMNOPUW. Glottal stop. That's the Hawaiian alphabet.
Oh, okay.
There's
Okay.
So when somebody says
I learn something new every day.
Mele Kalikimaka, that is a transliteration of Merry Christmas because they don't have enough letters to be able to
say
spell
Merry
it all.
Christmas.
So it comes out Mele Kalikimaka.
Well,
Hawaii
here's the signing.
Hawaii is the first state in the nation to adopt a 100% renewable energy requirement for electricity generation as Governor David Ige signs the measure into law. The goal to be achieved by 2045. Representative Chris Lee introduced the measure partly as a step to reduce electricity costs. This is from Hawaii Public Radio, HPR2. And there you've got it. They can do it by 2045, and honestly, I think everybody else can too.
I'm sure they can.
Yeah.
But they're up against more pressure than most of us because they don't have any oil.
They don't have
They got to tanker it all in.
They've got plenty of wind resources. They've got
That
plenty
they do,
of
and that's
sun
definitely going to
resources.
be utilized.
They've got plenty of waste
sun.
resources, and they can use all that to generate their power and whatever heat they need. And why would they depend on oil from some other part of the world when they can use their own power locally and keep the money in their own system?
Well,
Okay,
they didn't have that option until relatively recently.
that's true, I suppose. Relatively,
They have that option now, and
Yeah.
they're taking it.
although when the Hawaiian Islands were first settled and when they were first visited by Europeans, I will point out the ships and the boats that did all that work were powered by the wind.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now this one is one that I think is really interesting. Politico, and this was not just Politico.
No, this
brought
is
us
an interesting article.
A bunch of different things. A Republican entrepreneur is putting up $175 million behind a campaign whose message will have some party stalwarts seeing red. The GOP needs to deal with climate change. Among Republican political candidates, presidential candidates, only Lindsey Graham admits to believing human activity causes climate change. And the rest, in my opinion, have been bought off.
Bingo.
But,
Bingo. There's a picture of the guy up there.
Yeah.
He, somewhere in the article, he created some sort of a company, sold it for a lot of money.
Yeah.
And here he's got all this money, he's trying to do something useful with it.
Yeah.
And his aim, according to the article, is to get the Republican Party to shift its skeptical view of climate change and green energy.
Yep.
Topics that usually fall to the bottom of its list of priorities.
Well, actually, I think they're not quite at the bottom. They spend a lot of time denying it.
That they do.
Yeah.
Who was it that brought the snowball into Congress? One of the Republican leaders.
It was a Republican senator. I can't remember who that was, but it was definitely a Republican senator who wanted to make the point that if you've got snow in Washington, D.C. in February, it's obvious that there is no such thing as global warming. Sorry, it doesn't work. Okay. Researchers at Stanford University and UC Berkeley have outlined how each of the 50 states, by the way, we were just talking about this before.
We've talked about this same plan earlier in the year.
But outlined how each of the 50 states can achieve a complete transition to renewable energy by not 2100, but 2050, by golly.
I remember looking at that website. You could click on your state and it gave you the plan. Yeah.
That's right. The plans call for aggressive changes to both infrastructure and the ways we currently consume energy, but also show conversions that are economically feasible. This is from Stanford University News. And by the way, if anybody wants to do what Thomas just said, you can go to my website, which is geoharvey.wordpress.com, and look at the entry for Tuesday, June 9th. And the item that I just read will be there. And you can click on the Stanford University News link, and that will take you in turn to a place where you can find a link to
each state.
To each state.
Yeah.
That's
It's
all
fun.
available. It's fun. Yeah. And do they say Vermont doesn't have to do anything? No, they don't. I'll betcha.
I don't remember.
Yeah, well,
I don't remember.
Vermont's electricity is either, all of Vermont's electricity is either from out of state or renewable. But Vermont has a lot of cars in it, and trucks in it, and other vehicles in it, and planes land and people burn oil in their furnaces. And I saw today, actually yesterday, I'm sorry, on the way downtown, I went through the Harmony parking lot in Brattleboro, and I heard a noise that I didn't recognize. I should have recognized it because I had heard it before many years ago. But it was coal sliding down a chute coming out of a coal delivery truck.
So there's still some buildings in Brattleboro that
There
heat
are
by
still
coal.
buildings in Brattleboro heated by coal, unless they've found some other use for the stuff. But Vermont has a ways to go, but it's doing its thing. And our last item for today, that before we get into a different discussion, is this. Mercedes-Benz has unveiled a personal energy cell that, like Tesla's Powerwall, uses batteries to charge up during off-peak hours. The German car manufacturer revealed that each pack holds 2.5 kilowatt hours of electricity. Combined, 8 of them can hold 20 kilowatt hours to cover grid failure or backup solar power. And I don't remember, but it seems to me that's about a day's electricity for a normal family. And if you were really conserving power, it might be 2 or 3 days.
Might be a week.
It might be a week.
Yeah.
It depends upon how successfully you can conserve it. That's from the Daily Mail. So that is the end of the news items that we have, but you had something you wanted to talk about, Tom, and that was...
Well, it ties in with what you just talked about with the batteries and stuff like
batteries,
that.
Right.
What would you use batteries for? Well, one of the things is microgrids.
Yes, and what about microgrids in Brattleboro?
Well, there's a small group of people that meet monthly to discuss it.
This is a cabal, ladies and
Yes,
gentlemen.
yes. And we both participate in these meetings.
Oh, no, you've revealed everything.
And we were talking last week just before the solar exhibit or the solar talk down at the Tech Center, and we had a guy from Green Mountain Power, and we were talking about the possibility of creating a microgrid here in Brattleboro.
Yes.
And in fact, because of the way the grid within Brattleboro grew over the last century, it would make more sense to have 2 microgrids in Brattleboro.
Yes.
So why don't you explain to the people what a microgrid is?
Well, I think everybody who's watching this show probably knows because we just ran a
We've talked
slideshow
about
on microgrids. A microgrid is a set of electrical power sources and loads that can be isolated. They can be islanded.
Correct.
And that...
So if the grid goes down, you're going to have some power.
You got power. And a microgrid can actually be done in an ordinary house if it has its own source of power. It doesn't have to be renewably done. The Brattleboro Retreat has a microgrid which is dependent on its own generating facilities, which can generate roughly 3/4 of a megawatt of power, and which is about, it's not quite enough to do 3 times its normal load. And they can and have shut themselves off from the grid for various reasons. A microgrid, typically a hospital has a microgrid, the police might have their own microgrid, and so forth. And what we're looking at is a situation where Green Mountain Power is experimenting with microgrids in Rutland.
They have established one in Rutland.
They have established a
microgrid.
microgrid. It is working, and it has batteries to back up the solar power that is providing power, the main source of power to the microgrid. There may be other sources of power. Now that microgrid is interesting because it doesn't cover a hospital or a school that could be used as an emergency shelter. It covers an entire neighborhood that includes a hospital and a school that can be an emergency shelter. And so the result of that is that you've got something that's a good deal bigger than what usually happens in towns and cities in the United States. unless they're on military bases, because military bases
They have their, just for national defense purposes.
absolutely.
They want to be able to operate.
They want to be able to operate those things. In fact, I was in Brooklyn when the power failure happened in 1965, and my apartment had I was in a dormitory at Pratt Institute. The apartment that I had that was in that dormitory was on the 7th floor, and I could very clearly see the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and people were saying, "Oh no, the Russians are attacking. They're going to bomb us, and they've shut the lights out so that the bombers can't see where New York City is." And I said, "Excuse me, look at the Navy Yard. The Navy Yard was lit up like a Christmas tree. They had all their lights on because they had a microgrid.
They had their own
Navy
grid.
Yard. This is years ago. Every ship at sea has its own microgrid. So
Yeah, you're right. Don't even think about that.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it is.
the idea here is, if you have your own microgrid, it has a bunch of implications, one of which is you can survive a storm. When the rest of the grid goes down, if we had 2 microgrids in Brattleboro that were big enough to cover the entire community, we would just keep on trucking.
Well, if they were big enough to cover the entire community, they would be very, very expensive by
They
today's
would indeed.
technology.
They would cost many millions of dollars. However, another thing to bear in mind here is Brattleboro spends currently about $24 million a year on electricity.
You mean everybody's electricity
the
bills
municipality,
tied together?
all
yeah.
of them tied
Yep.
together. And if we had a pair of community microgrids or a set of community microgrids, because you could do this on a neighborhood basis, the power generating facilities for those microgrids would presumably be mostly solar. And that means the money that we would be spending on that microgrid would be staying in the community instead of being turned over eventually to somebody in Canada or
Well, we've
whatever.
got solar right now.
Yeah.
And they're selling the power.
Yes.
They're selling it outside of Brattleboro.
Yes.
But if the grid goes down, they won't be able to sell that power.
Yes, and Brattleboro won't be able to use it, and neither will anybody else, because there's no way to operate the grid unless you've got a way of operating
Well,
the
that's
grid.
why we want a microgrid.
That's right.
One of the questions that the Green Mountain Power guy that asked us when this meeting we had last week was, you got to figure out what you want to keep going in the event of an islanded grid.
Right.
You're going to want to keep the hospital going.
Yes.
You're going to want to keep the emergency shelter, which is the high school, going.
Right. You want the
You're probably
fire
going to
department.
want a grocery store open.
Yes.
You're probably going to want a couple of pharmacies open.
Yes.
Maybe a gas station.
Yes.
Maybe 2.
Yes.
But you got to figure these things out, because
Yes.
everything costs money.
Yes.
And it's technically feasible or possible to put the whole town on it. But it's going to be very,
It would be
very
a lot
expensive.
of money. On the other hand, if you have a long-term plan of putting the town on, you could say we're going to put the town on in 20 years.
And grow into
And
this.
grow
Yeah,
into that.
That's entirely possible.
So-
The decision has to be made. This decision, I think, will be made, because I feel optimistic about this.
I
think
could-
we're going to see it happening.
Yeah, I could foresee a time when every community actually every community in the country would have its own microgrid.
It is inevitable, but it's
yeah.
going to take a long, long
Grid
time.
resilience. And by the way, if anybody's really interested in this, if you go to the BCTV website, or actually it's also on YouTube, you could just Google, Energy Week microgrid special. But if you go to BCTV website and you look up Energy Week special microgrid, you will find a special on microgrids that will give you a slideshow. You can go to BCTV, look up, do a search in the upper right-hand corner, and you have to press enter at the end. You can't just click on it. Energy Week special. And I think on the first page of what comes up, you'll find the special on microgrids. So we're going to say goodbye and get ourselves off to the special that we're doing this week, which is going to be shown on Channel 8. So goodbye, everybody.
Well, I hear voices, so I think.
Yeah, why don't you click on that thing so we can wave?
I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land so lovely earth can stay still.